Hi, I'm Elizabeth Morris, and I'm here today to discuss Dr. Nola Hylton's career path. So perhaps you can start by telling us what your title is and what your job responsibilities are.
Sure. I'm a professor of radiology at UCSF. I'm a PhD researcher, and I direct a program in breast MRI.
And we've worked together over the years in the breast MRI program. And so it's been about 20 years or so that I have known you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering if you wanted to share if there was anything special you think about your career trajectory or your career path.
Right. Well, in honesty, our field is not that old. It may seem like a long time, but it really wasn't so long ago that we were thinking about using MRI to understand breast cancer more. So it's been really interesting, and I appreciate the fact that we have this fantastic tool that really only came into being as a medical device in the 80s. And that's when we started to think about how to use it best in breast cancer, and we've come so far. We've found that it's very sensitive to breast cancers. We found that it shows you anatomically such exquisite pictures of what the breast anatomy is. And we're still today trying to figure out the best way to harness that so that we can help solve some of the important problems today. My own program is focused on using MRI to evaluate how tumors respond to chemotherapy. And you've been doing the same work actively, and we're learning so much, and I think potentially this is one of the most powerful tools we'll have to non-invasively understand how breast cancers respond or don't respond to chemotherapy. So across the field, I think a frustration has been that we haven't made more progress. We have this incredibly powerful method, and we have this incredibly serious problem and pervasive disease. And we'd like to use more of it to tease out what's going on and to personalize what we're doing for women who present with a lump or with a mammographic abnormality and their life changes overnight. And we should be able to do more with what we have. And hopefully, what will happen within ISMRM is that we'll direct a lot more of the powerful methodologies that are being developed, mainly driven by neurologic applications, and use them to rapidly address breast cancer.
So during your career, have there been easy or difficult areas for you in proceeding?
I think of our era, I was a PhD student in applied physics in the early 80s. And MRI was really in its infancy in terms of becoming commercially available.
Right, like you actually were at one of the very first MR meetings in the Bay Area, is that correct?
I was.
Yeah.
I think it was the second ever meeting, and it was held in San Francisco. I think the first was in New York, the second one was in San Francisco, and I was a graduate student. So I did attend that one. It was in one of the precursor societies to ISMRM. And it was one roomful of people that were working in this area, and we were still trying to understand T1 and T2.
Right.
So the big exciting papers were about what was T1 weighting, or what was spin echo, and how to multi-slice, and these were the innovations of the time that now are fundamental principles of MRI. So it was really exciting. It was a lot of lively discussions.
So how has it been being a woman in the community and in the ISMRM?
Well, it was very isolating originally, but I was used to that as a doctoral student in physics, and as a black woman in physics. I was very used to being not very well represented. All that being said, I had tremendous mentors and supporters and encouragers and people who, in spite of my ignorance of what was going on, helped me. When I look back and I think about how pivotal they were in helping me find my way, I can appreciate now what I see, which hopefully translates into being a good mentor for others, because there's so much that we take for granted that is not obvious at all to young people.
And so if you had any advice for the women of ISMRM who are at the beginning of their careers, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would say act with more confidence. Mm-hmm. You really do know a tremendous amount, and don't hold back, because a part of the learning process is representing what you know, either because you're giving lectures or you're having discussions or you're interacting. I think we have a tendency to listen until we are absolutely sure of what our opinion. And I think just like a physical activity, like a sport, if you don't practice, you get better with practice. So I think the difficult challenges I know that I certainly faced was figuring out how to articulate my own opinion and to be willing to make a mistake publicly.
Right.
And I think those are just characteristics that we tend to have. And so we sit back. But in the process of doing that, you also are not learning how to
self-advocate.
Exactly.
And I think for women, finding their voice and using their voice is a very difficult thing for them to learn initially.
Right.
And so how was it you're a mother as well, you have 2 children.
Right.
How was it with trying to work and balance and have an academic career? Do you have any tips or advice?
Oh, many. And now as a parent of 2 adults, and knowing how the wonderful people that they are, you can now know that I didn't shortchange them. You cannot give your children everything, and we will always feel in the process that we should be doing something differently, we should be doing something more, that maybe we're not spending enough time. But I don't feel that way now. I feel the best thing for my children was to have experienced through their parents what it is to have 2 working parents, and what we did in our lives, and to even partake in some of that. My kids would come into we'd screen them, but they'd come into the magnet room as young children, and they they saw what an MRI machine was, and it just was like another anything, a car. They were very comfortable there, and I think they've patterned a little bit of that in that they fully expect to work,
right,
have a social life, and have all those aspects, and they take that for granted. So my advice is, you do the best you can. You never know on a given day who's going to be sick, what the need is going to be. You do your best. Sometimes it all comes together, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's good.
The word flexibility often comes up a lot with talking to women and men who are trying to be good parents and also be giving their all at their job. Right. So how were you able to find a situation that allowed you to have some flexibility, and what advice would you give people to start out with for finding that flexibility? Because I think you can't be successful without having, for example, the sick days, and there's always going to be someone that has to be there.
100% agree. And I worry that we're speeding up.
Right.
And response times have gotten so much shorter.
Right.
I mean, we're all, as a society, dealing with this. And the pressures, nonetheless, have stayed the same in terms of all of us are high achievers, and all of us do not want to let someone else down.
Right.
I think at the bottom line, you're willing to let yourself down before you're willing to let someone else down. So if you're the next person in the responsibility chain for something, you will do whatever to make sure that step happens. And I think those pressures make us escalate the pace that we're doing everything. So this is not just in science and in academics, this is in life, and I see this everywhere. And flexibility is obviously important, but I also think we need to have more redundancy so that it doesn't become a single person's responsibility to fill in. And if they're not there, things fall apart.
Right, and so a lot of people build, I think, support systems wherever they are, whether it's family, whether it's hired help with nannies, and so
Right.
how did you? Because I hired help.
Right.
I had help with house cleaning, with childcare, and because I was not surrounded by family. So
Right.
how were you able to do that?
I had the same
Right.
situation, which is incredibly fortunate. So we had a live-in nanny for 7 years until both children were in full-time in school. And I live in San Francisco. I worked locally. School was local. School was also children of many working parents, and we had a network of people we could call if you couldn't pick up, and so forth. My husband and I had the kinds of rigorous schedules, but flexible enough so that we can adjust, and it worked out that we could do that. And I think we actually were pretty fortunate in not having too many sick days or too many things. I look back and I think it's amazing.
How did we do it?
How did we
Right.
do it? Right. I mean, I think I was on
Yeah.
the lucky side. So you do that day-to-day managing. I think you have to just be mentally balanced. And I also, with the growing numbers of women and men who are understanding that they actually have to, it won't just happen.
Right.
You have to actively decide what you're going to prioritize because something's falling.
Right,
Not
right.
everything is going to be done. So it's better to think about it up front and decide which things are your priorities than it is to have something fail and
Right.
realize
You realize it's
can't
not going to
do
be
it.
perfect. Your house
Right.
isn't always going to be clean.
Right.
So you just have to let certain things go. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank
Absolutely.
you so much for talking with us today, Dr. Nola Hylton.